Hello and welcome to the Godot community. My name is Sahira Dean. I am your virtual PLC lead for high school 2D art. In today's webinar, I wanted to talk about how to stretch your budget. So the biggest tip for that is to get creative with what you already have on hand. For example, you can do a design challenge using common items. So in our VAC class, what we did was have them come up with a design just using paper clips and some post-it notes. So some of them came up with like a jewelry, some of them came up with like a hot air balloon, right? So with the design fundamentals, or the VAC2 part of Intro to Art, it focuses on the principles of design. So it really gets them to give them to thinking about how things are made or what I can change up. Just a little bit more depth in terms of thinking ways to create and how things are made. Another thing is stickers, right? So I do teach high school, of course, and stickers typically aren't seen in the high school classroom. However, I had a parent to donate a bunch of stickers. So instead of throwing them away, I kept them in my closet. And with my AP students, I allowed them more access into different materials that I have. So this one student in particular started the sticker usage, and which is the student on my right. He came up with an interesting idea. It fit with his investigation, and it worked. He pulled it off. So of course, being in the classroom and being amongst other students, students kind of see what you're doing and they kind of want to experiment as well. So needless to say, all the stickers were used, but I'm okay with that because they were used in a very innovative way. So if you have a bunch of yarn, which is a big thing that kind of sticks around, construction paper, which I actually have a bunch of construction paper right now in my classroom, I'm having students paint with paper for a portrait assignment, which I'll share at a later time. So, get creative and kind of innovative of what you have on hand. Using scrap materials is another one. There was a bunch of wood in one of the closets. Now, I must say that this is my third year at my current school. So, when you come into a new school or a new classroom, you're kind of left with what's already there or what might not have been used all the way by the previous teachers. So it's a cool opportunity, but also, it's an interesting one because you have all these things and you got to figure out what to do with them. So back to what I was saying about the wood, there was a bunch of wood that was left behind by one of the 3D teachers, and probably from one of the sets that was built, they might have donated the wood to the art department. So what I did was cut the wood down into, I think it was 12 by 12 or 16 by 16. I think it was 12 by 12 actually, pieces that they could actually paint on. So this provided students with another opportunity to paint on something other than just paper or canvas, right? So they got to see, oh, this really soaks up the paint really quickly, or, just the experience of having the sand down the edges and prime it before they could actually use it, right? So all in all, a great experience for them. And then it gets them to thinking about what other materials they can actually create art on or create art with. So another thing I wanted to point out on this slide was the use of old Prismacolor boxes as palettes. So at the top of the screen, what I did was, like the previous teacher left behind a bunch of Prismacolor color pencil boxes, but all the color pencils were actually dumped in bins organized by colors. So again, instead of throwing those out, I thought those would make excellent palettes. It was something I didn't have to necessarily buy. I had some wax paper on hand, didn't have to buy any palette paper. So we used up all the wax paper, and then started using the palette paper, but it made a really good reusable painting palette, and actually kept the paint, as long as they closed the lid really good, it kept the paint usable for a couple weeks at a time. So a good tip, the Prismacolor color pencil boxes, the pencil, sometimes the pencil sets, those come in metal boxes, but really anything with a lid that closes really tight, you can definitely use as a palette. So We labeled them with their name, and then I assigned them some brushes for the semester. And they kept up with the palette, used it as they needed it, and then returned the palette and the brushes at the end of the semester. Using up old books. I'm a huge fan and advocate of students doing the visual verbal journals. So a lot of times if I come across old books that will just be discarded, otherwise we'll use those as journals. So here you can see, different takes on old textbooks. So they gesso over the pages or paint over the pages, or they'll block out or mask out images and information that they don't need and work directly on top of it and create a visual verbal journal. So I believe it presents another opportunity for students to kind of think a little bit beyond or think a little bit deeper in terms of creating art. Because a lot of times, of course, you're dealt with, students are met with an empty canvas or a blank piece of paper. But when they come across, something that they have to make art on, which already has images or words, and how to kind of, figure out how to make it art or make it their own art, it just presents another interesting opportunity for the student and helps them to think a little bit deeper, in my opinion. Reaching out to businesses in your community, and definitely if you have an active alum association. So Georgia State University, one year they were moving, they were relocating their interior design. And so they had a bunch of fabric to give away, a bunch of just like anything interior design related you can think of, they were pretty much donating or giving away. So it's kind of a free grab. And I just heard about it through the grapevine. But it got me to thinking about other businesses and waste materials. Like, what do they do with, maybe they order a bunch of fabric and they have to cover like 5 chairs. What do they do with that extra fabric? Or mat board, if you're near a framing place and they have a bunch of mat board, right? So they cut all these windows out and they have a bunch of scraps left. Or maybe they have a mass matting project to do and they have a bunch of scrap left. And a lot of times that scrap is usable. So reaching out to local framing places, local fabric printing or interior designing places, or even fashion places. Sometimes they might donate like clothes and you can use the fabric, right? So getting innovative with ways to connect with businesses in your community can be a really lucrative opportunity for you and your classroom and your students. Bartering with other teachers is another big one. Now, if you are a singleton at your school, or maybe there are only a couple of art teachers in your county, so say you have a smaller county, join a local Facebook group. So I know. A lot of times there might be a Facebook group for like, teachers in the Southeast or something like that, or in a certain part of Georgia. But nonetheless, in my county, we actually send out, like if we have, again, if you're coming into a classroom where you're a new teacher and you don't have anything, or any ideas in terms of what to do with window paint, or you have no desire to do anything with window paint, or all these beads are left over, I promise you there's somebody that is interested in what you don't want. So what we do is send it out through email, first come, first serve, anybody want this? Or even if you want ideas, maybe you're not sure that you want to get rid of it, but you just want some other ideas on how to use it. Sending out an email and, saying, okay, this is what I have. Do you have any drawing paper? Do you have any pencils that we could trade? You might be surprised with what you get. Speaking with your principal. Now, I know this can kind of be intimidating at times, but it is really important to speak with your principal or your administrator and just kind of lay your case, right? So during the virtual time, let me back up and say that one thing I'm really passionate about is putting student work on display. So keeping that rotated in the hallways throughout projects is something that's really big for me because it, awards the student. They see their work in the hallway. Other teachers can kind of see what they've done if there's a name tag. So it's limitless in terms of just the advantage of showcasing student work. But during the COVID period, we weren't collecting physical work. All the work was being collected digitally. So my principal the year before had already complimented me on just continuing to put work in the hallway. So remembering that, I asked him if we could speak. So he gave me a time to come to his office, and I asked him if we could, if he would purchase some printing ink for our department so that we could print work out and display it in the hallways. And he did. So he purchased, and it was the big laser print printer, the red, yellow, blue, and the black. And, it wasn't cheap for sure, but he purchased, enough ink to actually last us that year. And it's, still lasting right now. So speaking up and asking, a lot of times your principals at the end of the year or towards the end of the year or even semester might have a little bit of a cushion or leftover that they need to do something with. So, it doesn't hurt to ask, set up a meeting, send an email and just say, do you have any time to talk about an exciting idea I have for my students? Something like that. But definitely state your case, make it sound exciting, and, see what happens. These are some other images that I was able to print out and put on display. And I thought this one was pretty cool. One of my favorite images that came out of the virtual teaching experience. So I hope that you got some cool ideas from this webinar. If you have any other ideas that you might want to share, any ideas that you've done, any questions that you might have, please feel free to hop on over to the Godot community and join me on the High School 2D Art, where we can share some ideas. I would love to interact with you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day.